Hi everyone, this is Michelle from MaMi's Country Quilts. Welcome back to our virtual classroom. Today we are going to be doing a class on our pattern called the diamond setting. So you can see to my right here we have two examples with two different collections. So this pattern makes a runner and it also makes 6 placemats. So we've done one set with the O Canada from Northcott. And then in the other one, we've done the vegetables from Elizabeth Studios as our second sample. And again, it's the runner with the 6 placemats. We just have 4 up here right now, but we've got the other ones in the front here. So with that, today we're going to use a collection called Sister Bay from Moda. And before I go into the fabrics themselves, I'm just going to go over the supply list real quick. So for this class, we recommend that you have a square ruler, whether it's 12-inch square or a 15-inch square, it does not matter. And also a 24-inch long ruler, whether it's 6 or 8.5, that part doesn't matter. The important part is the 24 inches for the length when we're cutting and squaring off our fabric. Other than that, you just need your regular sewing tools that you have, pins, cutters, like that. In this case, because we're going to be using some paper templates, I have an extra cutter here which I use for cutting paper, and all it is just an extra handle that I don't normally use, and I just have an old blade in it. So if you have some old blades hanging around and a cutter that you don't normally use for cutting your fabric, that's a great promotion to a paper cutter. So if you have one of those, that's great. If not, it's not a big deal. You can use the cutter that you have. I'm using this as my regular cutter, my 45mm. You'll also need a couple bags for this project, some Scotch tape, a stapler, and paper clips or Wonder Clips, whatever you have on hand, and of course, again, labels and a pen. So with that, I'm going to jump into the fabrics. So I'm just going to clear this out of the way. Okay, so for our fabrics, if you've purchased the kit from us, you're going to be unpacking your kit and you'll notice that you have labels on your fabric. If you haven't purchased a kit from us, that's fine as well. But you'll have to figure out which 6 fabrics you're going to use as your feature fabrics, which are this part of the placemat and your diamonds. So you're going to need 6 fabrics for that. So, and label them A, B, C, D, E, and F. Now, the way that these are labeled, there's no right or wrong. And in your package, if you wish to put a different sequence of fabrics together, which one of these are A, B, C, or D does not matter. It's whatever is pleasing to your eye. So basically what I've done here, if you have a look at my fabrics, I've got a fair amount of blue in my A, my C, and my E, and then the ones in between have less color in them. So I've just organized them that way because we're going to be alternating the diamonds. So in this O Canada sample, it's very obvious. We did red, gold, red, gold, red, gold. Okay, because the 6th one is right here. So it's just important that you have them labeled A through F. The order is entirely up to you. There's no right or wrong in that. So besides those 6 fabrics, you're going to need your background fabric, which is your H fabric, and then you'll need your little accent fabric, which is G, and that's this little border here on either side of your diamonds. And then you'll have a piece for your binding, which we have labeled as binding. So before you get started, please take the time to label your fabrics like we have here. So you'll have your binding, you'll have your G fabric, which is that little border on either side of the diamonds. Then you'll have your H fabric, which is your background, so that's behind fabric behind your diamonds. And then you'll have your 6 fabrics that we're going to be building our diamonds and the body of our placemats with. So with that, I'm just going to move these out of the way and we're just going to start cutting. So I'm just going to start with my A fabric. So with your A through F fabrics, we're going to be squaring our fabrics off and then cutting a 12.5-inch strip by width of fabric. I'm just going to take my bags down here. All right, so again, just a reminder on how to square. So I have my fabric folded in half. My fold is down beside me at the bottom. I'm going to take my 24-inch ruler and my square. I'm going to find a straight line on my fold, and you just want to cut a little bit off here, the least you can cut off. And then you're going to butt up your 24-inch ruler against your square. I'm just going to move over just a tad. So straight line is running through the fold of the fabric. I'm going to butt this one up against, and I'll move my square away, grab my cutter. Then with my hand, my thumb down here, my forefingers up here, I start cutting below the fabric, stop before the top of my fingers, bring my thumb up, and my fingers up, all the way up. If you do it that way, your ruler's not going to slip on you. So we've got that squared away, and now I'm going to cut a 12.5-inch strip. So my ruler is 8.5 inches wide. So that means I have to add 4 inches to my 8.5 to make my 12.5. So if you have a 6-inch ruler, basically how that works is you take what you have to cut. So if you're cutting 12.5 inches, minus the size of your 24-inch ruler, and then add whatever that number is what you're adding with your square. So for, in my case, 12 minus the 8.5 is going to be equal to 4. So if you've got a 6-inch ruler, it's going to be 12.5 minus 6, and that's going to be 6.5 on your square. All right, so we're going to cut 12.5. So I'm just running my 4-inch line on the edge of my left edge of my fabric, butting up my 24-inch ruler, and then I'm going to cut that. So you've noticed here that I've put my labels on the very left side of my fabric. It's going to be important that you keep track of what fabric is what, so make sure that label stays there, and keep these handy because they're going to become the key for what fabrics are what as we go along. So this is your first one. I'm just going to move that to the side, and then I will grab my B and do the same thing. So you're going to do this for fabrics A, B, C, D, E, and F. So you go ahead and cut. I'm going to cut mine, and I'll be right back. All right, so I've got my 6 fabrics squared and cut into 12.5-inch by width of fabric. Now you're going to take those 6 12.5-inch strips, and you're going to subcut those into one 12.5 by 12.5-inch square and one 2.5 by 12.5-inch rectangle. So again, I'm just going to cut my selvage off. So again, just the same squaring procedure. once you have it squared off, you can just use your square, and we're going to do 12 and a half. So you're going to have one 12 and a half by 12 and a half inch square and one 2 and a half by 12 and a half inch rectangle. All right, so before we carry on to the next one, we're going to label these. So you'll take your labels. Your big squares are going to be labeled A1. So these are your A1 blocks. And I'm going to put in brackets here what fabric it is. So this is my F fabric. And your smaller piece is going to be your A2. And again, I'm just going to put in brackets my F fabric. So I'm just going to stack those up. So I'm starting with F because I want F on the bottom. And I'm going to carry on with my E, and I'm just going to stack those up here. The remainder of this strip we're going to use for the next step. So just lay those down beside your other ones. And then just take your next fabric, which is going to be my D fabric, my E fabric, which is this one. And you're going to do the exact same thing. So you're just going to square off your one end. Cut one 12 and a half by 12 and a half inch square and one 2 and a half by 12 and a half inch rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and do that while you do yours, and then I'll be right back. All right, I've got my 6 A1 and A2 pieces cut. So you can see here I have them labeled A1 with fabric A on top, then B, C, D, all the way down to F. And same thing with my A2 pieces. So 12 and a half and by 12 and a half and 2 and a half by 12 and a half. So these will just go up here for the moment. And then what we're going to do is take the remaining piece of that 12 and a half inch strip. So this is my F fabric, and again I'm going to put this one on the bottom. And what I'm going to do right now is just going to restack these so that they are lined up on the left hand side and the bottom. So I'm lining up this edge and this edge. All right, so I got these lined up. I'm going to press this crease out. So I'm going to put this on my ironing board. To do that while my iron is heating up. And while that's heating up, I'm going to grab my template. So in your pattern, you should have had these pages. So you should have on page 4 and 7, you have your Fabric H group of templates sheets, and then on page 6, 5, and 6 you have your Fabrics A to F group of templates. That's what they're talking about here in your cutting instructions. So what we need right now is these 2 sheets, but we're just gonna go ahead and cut these out right now while we have them out. So this is where I would use my paper cutter and just a straight edge. And what you want to do here, like it tells you in the instructions on page 4, just to cut on the red line all the way around. So I'm just cutting the big square or rectangle here. So I'm just cutting all the way around on the red line, or slightly beyond the red line. So another little tip, when you buy this pattern, we've given you these templates, but it's a good idea for you to actually make copies of these before you start your pattern, because these are going to be your masters. So don't cut your masters, and that's why we have this little test square in here. And that's to make sure that when you're photocopying your pages, you have the right scale. Make sure your printer's printing the exact same scale that we've printed ours. So that's just a little test. So if you print one page and you put them together, look through the light, those two squares should be exactly one on top of one another. So just a reminder to make your copies before you get to this point here. Okay, so this is for my placemats. And now for these guys, same thing. You're going to be cutting on the red lines. So you're going to have two big rectangles here and a square. So we're going to cut this. And we're going to cut that. And then the bottom. And I'm just going to cut the where it says tape, I'm going to cut on that blue line on this guy. And I'll do the same thing with this one. So this one you're going to cut the square off the bottom here. So you're going to make a cut to separate those two pieces. And just cut all the way around. Okay, so the pieces you've cut for the runner, we're going to put in your runner bag. So you're just going to take one of those bags and you're going to label this bag runner. This one's going to be labeled placemats. So I'm going to take my placemats, or my runner pieces, and I'm going to put them into my runner bag so I don't get them mixed up with my other ones. I'm just going to pop those in there, and then I'm going to grab my two rectangles, and where it says tape, you're going to match up the top of the rectangle that says temp number 15, and you're going to match your two blue lines together, and you're going to tape that together. So just like that. So we're going to use that for our placemats. So at this time here too, we'll just take our placemat bag and we'll just put our A1 and A2 pieces in there so that they're not floating around with our other pieces. Okay, so I'll put this away. So I'm going to press this out. Alright, so I'm going to bring my stack of fabrics back to my cutting board. And again, you want to make sure that you're all lined up here. And we're going to take our template and just put it on top of all 6 fabrics. And I'm leaving myself room here so that if I'm not perfectly lined up, I'm still going to be okay. So you want to make sure that that template is on top of all of your fabrics. So this is a little trick that I use whenever I'm using templates, is I'll lay my template down on all 6 instead of cutting out each rectangle. So if you're looking at the pattern, it'll tell you to cut the rectangles. Because I'm giving you a little tip to do it differently, this is how I would do it when I'm building these. So I would just put this on top, make sure I've got at least a quarter of an inch on the bottom of my template and on the left hand side. Then I will take my stapler and I will staple in the center of each template. So I'm going to go like that all the way down. And now I'm just going to cut around that. So I'm going to grab my cutter. And I'm just going to do a quarter of an inch beyond my paper and past. And then I'm just going to cut all the way up. And I'm just going to use my long ruler here. So I've got this like that. And I'm just going to cut a quarter of an inch beyond at the top. So this part we're going to use to cut, we're going to use this leftover fabric for a runner. So I'm just going to leave this up here for now. I don't want to unstack them. I don't want to move them around. I want them to stay stacked up like that. So this is now ready to cut, but we're just going to do all the cutting first, and then we're going to go ahead and do the assembly. So I'm just going to take this like this, just fold it and put it inside my placemat bag. And then we're just going to quickly finish cutting the background and our accent pieces. So now we're going to take our G fabric, which is our little accent fabric. And again, we're going to square this off, and we're going to cut first we're going to cut 4 1-inch pieces. So I'm just going to fold this, and again, I've got my tag here on the edge, the right hand side. All right, and we'll grab big ruler, and I'm just going to use a smaller one here because this is a smaller cut. All right, so we need 4 1-inch strips off of this piece. So I'm going to go ahead and cut those right now while you cut yours. All right, so once you have your 4 1-inch strips cut, you're going to subcut those into 12 1-inch by 12.5-inch pieces. So you can leave these folded actually when you're doing this. Just make sure your white selvage is up, and then you're just going to subcut, or first you're going to square. So I'm just going to take my selvage off. And then I'm just going to measure over 12.5 inches. So we need 12 of these pieces. I'm just going to use a smaller ruler here again. And we want 12.5 inches. So 12.5 is going to be on the left-hand side. just going to cut that. So that's going to give me 2 pieces. I'm just going to put them right side up right away. And then if you open up your strip, you'll get a 3rd one. And again, I'm just pressing that center crease out of there. So 12 and a half. This is an extra piece. So out of each strip, you're going to get 3 pieces. So go ahead and finish yours while I finish mine, and I'll be right back. All right, I've got my 12 1" by 12 and a half inch G pieces cut. So I'm just going to leave that label on there. And I'm just going to take a paper clip, or if you've got a Wonder clip, you can use that as well, and just clip these together. And these are going to go into my placemat bag as well. So we'll put that in there. Next, we're going to grab our H fabric, which is your background fabric. So again, we're just going to square this off. I'm just going to move my label to the right-hand side. I'm going to grab my long ruler and my square. So for this one, we're cutting 1 8.5 inch strip. So if my ruler is 8.5, so it's going to be exactly this ruler. But if you've got a 6-inch ruler, you're just going to take the 8.5 minus the 6, and you would use 2 inches from your square plus your 6 to make that 8.5 inch measurement. But because mine is 8.5, I'm just using the whole ruler. Make sure you're nice and straight on the bottom. And I'm going to cut. And we're just going to put this away because we're going to need this again for our runner. And now we're going to cut our Group H template out of here. So we need 6 of these. So again, if we can keep this folded in half. Just make sure you line up your edges. Then you're just going to square this off. So I'm cutting off my selvage edge. And I'm going to cut 6 of these. So I'm cutting 2 at a time, and again you can see I'm just leaving about 1/4 inch all the way around. So I'm just going to measure 1/4 inch past this one, or slightly less. So that is 2. So instead of using my paper now, I'm just going to move my fabric over because it's exactly the size that I want it to be. And I'm just going to cut on the edge of my fabric. Then move that over again. And then just trim off that edge. Okay, so because we were cutting folded, these are stacked. The top one's right side up, the second one is wrong side up. So we're going to flip these all so that they're all right side up. So this is right side up. This one's upside down, so we're going to flip it right side up. This one is right side up. And this one's wrong side up, so we're going to flip it up. So we're just going to line these up so that the edges are all lined up. And again, we're just going to put our template paper in the center of your fabric like that. And again, we're going to grab the stapler and we're going to staple these on. So in the middle of each piece, just like that. And we're going to turn it around. So people say, well, why do you use a stapler instead of pins? Well, when you use pins, they create a bump. So then your piece is not laying flat. When you're using a stapler, when you're done stapling, it's very flat. So when you're going to go cut these apart with a ruler, you're not going to be wobbling on top of a pin. It's going to be nice and flat and straight. So you can see here that I couldn't get to these two. We're going to staple those when we start cutting these apart. And we can do that right now. And what I'm going to do here is just cut on the very edge of the pieces. So you're cutting out the exact shape of each template on here. So I'm putting this on the black line. I'm just going to cut like that. So now that I've done that, I can get to these two pieces. So for now, we're just going to take this and we're going to put it in our placemat bag. And we are actually, the only thing we have left to cut is the binding, which we'll do in a little bit. But before we start the assembly of our placemats, we're going to continue cutting for our runner. So we're going to move on to that right now.